Hey guys, how's it going? It's the animeoveranalyst here, and before we begin the podcast, I just need to give a quick heads up. So, during the recording of this podcast, I had some funky computer issues, and the first half of it got completely lost. However, Rice recorded his end, and did a backup on my phone. So, the first half of this podcast will sound a little bit funky because we've got two different sound files coming together. But when everything came back to normal, then the rest sounds pretty decent. And so just wanted to give you guys a quick heads up. And once again, a huge thank you to Rhyce Records for coming on and kind of supporting me and being my guinea pig for my first ever attempt at a podcast. So major props. Links to his social media and his channels down in the description below. Let's roll with the podcast.
Nerdcore, talking nerdcore today. We're talking nerdcore, talking nerdcore all way. We're talking nerdcore, talking nerdcore today. We're talking nerdcore all way.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's the animeoveranalyst here, and welcome to Talking Nerdcore, a new podcast that I am just starting. Today's topic is going to be My Hero Academia, and today I have Rhyce Records on. You want to say hi, Rhyce?
Everybody. Hi, podcast folks. Welcome to the podcast. Excited to be here. Do most people know your name?
Totally.
Or do not a lot of people know your name? Should I say AO, Anime
No.
Overanalyst?
For now, we'll just say animeoveranalyst. Yeah, I haven't fully disclosed my name yet. I mean, it's in one of my videos. It's actually in a couple of my videos early on.
All right.
Like,
we'll leave it a.
I guess if somebody really wants to go and find it,
They can.
do a little Easter egg look in there. But no, so just for context for anyone listening to the podcast, basically I've started this podcast for nerdcore artists, and basically what I wanted to do was just talk anime with nerdcore artists. It doesn't necessarily have to be about music per se. I just wanted to talk anime, and if music is talked about, we talk about music. But that's kind of what I was going with. So, earlier last week, I reached out to Rhyce and be like, hey, you want to join my pilot episode to see if we can get things going? And he said yes. And he wanted to talk about MHA, so we're going to be talking about MHA. So, just kind of, for those of you in the, who's listening to this, he just showed off his shirt, which is, My Hero Academia shirt. All you YouTube folks will gladly see that. So the format of these podcasts is just going to be more discussion based. I have no plans on like making it an interview. It's just going to be more of a conversation, and we may talk about things that we disagree on, or we may just completely agree on everything, which I very much doubt.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Just to kind of get started, Rhyce, what got you interested in My Hero Academia?
Interested in My Hero Academia. So, first kind of appeared across my desk, as it were, of anime watching. Oh my gosh. I mean, what, 5-6 years ago now, whenever it started. And it was one of those shows that I was like, okay, it's another superhero Marvel type show. And I just kind of fell in love with it, right? Because it wasn't that. It became a lot more.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's kind of how I got introduced to it. And then, yeah, I fell in love with the character All Might in particular. I love the voice actor, Chris Sabat.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for me, I started watching MHA probably 4 years ago. Maybe it was, yeah, I think by the time I started watching it, season 2 had ended, or season 3. And I enjoyed the first couple seasons. And then this is probably where my hot takes start going. I started getting bored with the show after season 3.
Okay, interesting. That is a hot take.
So, So yeah, that is a very hot take. Mainly because I felt like the way they did training arcs was not beneficial for the story. And I think the example that I can even talk about is this most recent season. Have you seen the most recent season yet?
I haven't seen it, but I have read the manga, so I know uh, basically the main storyline. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the training arc in this main season is literally Class 1A versus Class 1B going at each other, and it's supposed to be like Shinzo's kind of introduction into the hero class. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. However, it's kind of its own
Mm,
thing, and they don't really delve into the villain society until literally with the last 4 or 5 episodes. And the pacing of the training arc was awful. There was like two
mm,
episodes per fight, and half the fights I did not care about. And I find that a lot with these kind of training arcs where th- it it doesn't really affect the whole story
sure.
for me per se. Like they're training for something later on, but I think they could have redone it in a way to include story
Mm,
elements into the
mm.
training
What
arc
because from what I
more.
gather, right, and I think a lot of people have the same gripe as you with season 5, um, is in the manga,
Hmm.
that arc is like maybe a couple chapters, right? And so when you get into a show and you're like, all right, we're going to really
Yeah.
drag this thing out, I think they're mainly worried they're going to run out of material, like they did with Naruto, right? Where like they just kept filling space.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a little bit why it's so drawn out. Because I actually like that arc in the manga. And it feels like really
Oh,
important
really?
and like an exciting place to go, especially for Deku, as you see like the Black Whip is introduced, right? And so and so,
That's true.
oh, go
My
ahead.
thinking. Yeah, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
You go ahead. I'll talk about the Black Whip after you finish.
yeah, lots to unpack there, and we're skipping over 4 or 5 seasons, almost 5 seasons there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Yeah.
they should have spent a lot more time, and I think that's probably what they're setting up for season 6, which is like there's a thing called the war arc, which is what they're transitioning into, which.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm
Mhm.
seeing. I'm seeing that build
And
up.
so it gets pretty bonkers. So I'm excited with some of the latest panels I've seen with the anime manga comparisons with Shigaraki. Um, I think they're doing a good job with that. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was a little too late when they were like
Yeah.
pitching season 5 and they were showing 1B versus 1A. I was like, uh, this better not be the whole friggin' season because that's gonna be bad.
Yeah, it's like half to two
Ugh.
thirds. It's kind of
Oh no.
ridiculous.
Read the manga, people.
They did do a portion of it where there was like 2 or 3 episodes where it's Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki training with
Sure. Yeah.
Endeavor, and that I felt was too
Mm.
shorted. I would have loved to see that because they were like, okay, we spent like 3 weeks with Endeavor, and then that was it. Like they talked a little bit on how they learned with Endeavor, but I'm like, I felt like we could really expand on the Black Whip
Mm. Hmm.
concept, or even introduce it with Endeavor, or there are storytelling
Yeah.
elements that I'm mainly having issues with. It's mainly the storytelling
Yeah,
elements.
that's super fair. And
So,
again, I think it feels to me from not having seen season 5 yet, that they're drawing it out. They're because they will quickly run
yeah.
out of material once you hit the war arc because you know, they're still working through that in the manga. So
Oh yeah.
it's
I mean, the same thing happened with Black
oh my
Clover.
gosh, yeah,
So,
it's notorious in the anime
yeah.
realm, right? But Um, that and again, like I think if we go back, right, from My Hero Academia standpoint,
Hmm.
um, the reason I make a lot of songs about that, or at least I started out making a lot of songs about that anime, was the character development is brilliant. Um, and they really do a good job, I
Hmm.
think, of introducing side characters and making them have their moments. Like Kirishima is a great example.
I agree.
And yeah.
I agree. I
Yeah.
love Kirishima and I love
Mm.
Mina a lot recently. I so like watching even Mina, like she's not very much developed, but I love her attitude a lot, along with
Yeah.
Kirishima. But I'm a sucker for people who just want to do the right
Yeah.
thing,
And it's just like genuine people.
and then they do it with a positivity.
Like Overhaul.
Yeah. So
just a genuine dude.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I've got mixed feelings with Overhaul. I don't know. I heard that the manga did him better than the anime, but for the anime, I felt like he was overhyped. Like I thought he was a decent villain, but I almost felt more for La Brava and
Gentle Criminal.
was it Gentle Criminal?
I still want to do a Gentle Criminal song. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, I see. I think Sailor did a Gentle Criminal La Brava one just recently.
And that was really good. I mean, it's definitely been done. I just want to do the accent. But he's a great character.
Oh
And it was
yeah.
so funny to me because, and it's been memed many times, but when Deku says like, "You're the strongest, person I've fought, up to this point or whatever," and you're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
You fought Overhaul at this point.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's literally the Muscle Man who I literally thought was going to be Bakugo's dad for the longest time until they introduced Bakugo's dad. And I mean, me personally, I think that was almost a wasted opportunity. But
I like the Bakugo's
only because they had this similar
I like
hairstyle.
the Bakugo's dad is like a pushover.
Yeah.
Right. Like I like that it's his mom that's like the matriarch.
Yeah. I agree with that though. I do agree with that. It's like I'm not fully disappointed because it's the mom that you could definitely tell runs the family.
And you're like, who's Bakugo afraid of? No one except for his mom.
Yes. So I do appreciate Bakugo's character development a lot because it's a lot more subtle. It's things where like he's still angry all the time, but it's almost more intelligent, and I love that. It's like we're really getting to see his intelligence.
Yeah, for sure. He reminds me a lot of, and people are going to be like, really? He reminds me a lot of Vegeta in that sense, where like through Dragon Ball, through Dragon Ball Z rather, and into Dragon Ball Super, but less so, is he goes from being like a major villain who like kills thousands of people, right? And in essence, to being like, I don't want to be that person anymore, right? Like, and finding family and finding love and all that stuff, to the point where he like sacrifices himself, right? For little benefit, which is one of the dirtiest things I've ever seen in anime, where he like blows himself up and Boo's like, and you're like, what? But anyways, so no, I like Bakugo a lot. Bakugo's done smarter than Vegeta for sure. Like Vegeta's never been a smart dude.
Yeah.
Let's see. Deku as a character, or Izuku, is, I think, such a good placeholder for us, like as an audience, right?
Really? Yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. He's kind of like the normal guy.
Especially at the beginning. Like right where he's like telling you the story and like how I became the greatest superhero, whatever. But to me, even when he's like super powerful, right, he still represents like this ideal in a dark and potentially like dangerous world, where it's like he's still learning so much, like we would all, think we would. But I don't know. That's how I see him. What are thoughts on
that? I mean, I'm on the fence with Deku. I am one of those people who think he cries a little too much. He does get a little annoying with that. But like I am liking the character more with the more powers that he's introduced. Because now he's got to really think, whereas before it was just kind of like he was trying to copy All Might for the most part, with the whole like Detroit Smash, but instead of Detroit, it was like Delaware Smash, because that was a state All Might never said. And so he's like, I'm trying to be unique by almost going exactly what All Might says. But now that he's being introduced with all these different powers, he's got to kind of use his head a little bit more. He's like, okay, you know, I got the black whip that, you know, I still need to figure out how to control.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of my thing. Like every shonen protagonist, he's completely oblivious to Uraraka, and that kind of annoys me because they're both oblivious to each other, and Mina's like, just go for it already.
And yeah, Ochaku, Uraka, Uravity, whatever you want to call her. I like her also as like a character of somewhat reality, right? Of like this person who
I completely
because
agree.
like when you really get down to the nitty gritty of what the hero society is, and it's a fascinating like play on capitalism, right? Like the idea that they have to be popular and they have to be like the greatest. And rewatching the first season,
the whole media,
rewatching the first season really got me ingrained in like what she wants most is money for her family, like to save her family basically, or to give her family like a nice life, which I think is what we would all do in that situation, right? Like, so I think a lot about that. Also, her power is like badass. Like, there's so many, like she could just kick somebody into space.
Totally. Like, what? Yeah. I mean, I love how the whole dynamic between her fight with Bakugo was literally she was the one practically on the offensive, because the second she touches Bakugo, it's game over for him.
And he knows it.
So just that whole fight, that whole fight was just real interesting, and I secretly wish that she won just to prove that she could do it and she could overcome, you know, the anime rival.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could understand why Bakugo won, and then him being first place and absolutely getting pissed off because he couldn't fight Todoroki.
Yep. Classic Bakugo.
I do. I have been enjoying Todoroki's character as well. You know, with his whole issue with his father Endeavor. And actually, something that I had a notebook. Oh, here it is, with the names, because I am terrible with names. Bakugo, or not Bakugo, Todoroki's sister. What's her name? Fuyumi. I actually like her a lot. I love her whole personality of like just trying to have the family come together. That's something that I connect with a lot with just my own personal home life. That's literally me being like, okay, everyone's tearing each other apart. You know, Natsu is going off and he's being stubborn because for legitimate reasons, to be fair. And like, I'm sitting there and it's like, I've been in Fuyumi's shoes where it's like, I want everyone to stop fighting each other for like a dinner. Like, a dinner,
just
please.
Enjoy each other's company for a second.
So,
yeah.
So, it's little things like that I appreciate about My Hero Academia.
For a show that's 80% superheroes, they do a surprisingly good job of making it human and feeling like, you know, they have a lot of problems. And I think particularly Endeavor's arc is handled fairly well. And I kind of wish in the anime they would dive. I think they will, but that they dive into it even more. Because in the manga, right, they get like deep into his like thought process, like, and it starts to quickly break down into like he thought he was doing what was right, and he was trying to do, you know, make the best hero. He was trying to beat All Might, but not for necessarily like a selfish reason. Sorry, yeah, my internet's not great.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if that was my end or your end. So, yeah, with Endeavor, at least in the anime, he's he's trying to develop a more human side, at least with this latest season. So I do really appreciate his character in this latest season, because like we have this whole instance where he's kind of like he's going along with Fuyumi. He kind of realizes how much he screwed up with Todoroki and just his entire family because of how abusive he was. And for some reason, and this is just my issue with the anime, is that they replay that flashback to death with, you know, the whole Todoroki as a kid incident. And so they played it like 4 or 5 times in this season, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, the scene's playing, time to do some video editing for 5 minutes.
Which, again, filling time, right? But that's not even like the worst flashback, right? Like, do you know about Davi, right?
I've heard the theory. I've heard the theory with Dabi that he's Todoroki's brother. I'm guessing Toya, because Toya is kind of a dead brother. So I'm kind of putting 2 and 2 together. The one thing with My Hero Academia is that it's not too terribly thought-provoking, at least.
I suppose not.
When it comes to storytelling. So, but
I might switch my video.
Yeah, let's kind of back up and you can switch your video.
It might be what's causing it's trying to like stream HD through. So probably
fair enough.
More important for a podcast.
So yeah, let's actually back up and talk about season 1. What do you think about the whole process of joining UA and the whole like class system?
Oh yeah, I mean that's interesting. Because you don't really.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, you don't really think about it a whole lot when you're first introduced to it. You're kind of like, well, okay, it's a really good school, or it's kind of like college, right, where you want to get into Harvard, right? That's how I thought about UA. But then you really like back up and you say, okay, this school that Bakugo and Deku attend, the middle school essentially, it's very Japanese in the class system idea, where it's like this is a school in the middle of nowhere and you're striving to be in a better place, to be to like really beat yourself up to get into a school that like everybody thinks of as really good, and that you're going to be the best heroes and all this other stuff. And so that gets deep into, I think, the societal issues piece that we have in the US.
Definitely.
Not quite as deep, I think. But.
Well, that, and there's that whole recommendation system too, where like people can get in while being recommended, and they don't necessarily have to have good powers or whatnot. Granted, I think the ones who got recommended are good power, do have good, like Todoroki, and I think what's her name? The vice president who creates things from her body.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we're gonna get eaten alive because I can't remember her name. I know exactly who you're talking about though. Starts with a Y.
I wrote down half the names of the people, and I didn't write down her name because it was so obvious. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's definitely her. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, now I can't even remember.
All right, I'm looking it up.
Yeah, but
oh my gosh, it doesn't even come up first thing. Girl from My Hero Academia creates things. Momo is her name. Momo.
Yeah. Momo.
Yeah.
Momo. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't remember. It's like the second you hear Momo, you're like, yeah, I know that.
No.
But well, I think she went on recommendations, and I think it was Todoroki. I think they were the only two, if I remember correctly.
Well, I guess not Deku, because I thought for a second All Might gave him a recommendation, but I don't think they did. I think he passed the test, right, or whatever. But didn't Todoroki and Momo were in the test? So like
That's
I think
I
I
think
think All
yeah.
Might vouched for him. And
Yeah, yeah. Now I can't even remember
I know.
back to season 1.
It's been so long, and I just restarted it. So,
Yeah.
anyways, it's not really that important. But so they do the
No,
test.
no. But the whole recommendation system is real interesting because that's the whole like that's more of the money issue
Mm-hmm.
where like that's why I thought Todoroki got in was because his dad's Endeavor. Like if he doesn't get in, that's kind of sad. And I guess in a way, like even if Deku got in, he got in because of All Might. And like you saw how like Bakugo kind of got pissed off about that. He's like, how?
Yeah, and I particularly around like his powers, right? Like they at first they were all mystery. And again, I don't remember exactly how Deku got in because I know for sure the reason he did is because he saved Ochaku, right? Like he stopped the 0 point thing, right? So it was more about the rescue points is why he got in, but
yes,
which is fascinating. I didn't realize how much of a dick the Ida is, or Ida. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Lita? Is that like the speedy guy?
That's Lita. Lida. That's the name I did write down. Like I said, I wrote down like 3/4 of the class.
And I think they pronounce it Ida in the Lita. I don't think I do a hard L. But at least on the English version. But maybe they changed the name. I don't know. He's kind of an ass though. You like you don't realize that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that and like for some reason he's like, I'm gonna go and avenge my brother. And Stain was sitting there like, are you gonna save this guy? And Lita's like, no, I'm gonna avenge my brother. And I just love Stain. The fact that he was there for 2 episodes and he just tore down the entire society that MHA was based on. And just those 2 episodes.
Stain, I think is just starting to be reintroduced in the manga, but the Stain as a character is brilliantly written, and is very much like what Batman would be in the My Hero Academia world, right?
Yeah.
But with a cool power. I like Stain a lot. I think Stain was probably the best written villain, or most believable villain, of the 3, and he only had 2 episodes.
Yeah. Like, for the longest time, I loved him a whole lot more than Shigaraki. Now, I got to the Shigaraki flashback that just came out, and so I'm kind of getting there more, but like, for the longest time, that was actually half the reason why I dropped MHA for the longest time. Because they're propping Shigaraki up to kind of be parallel to Deku, and I was just sitting there and it's like I couldn't care about him at all. Like, I just didn't find him interesting. I felt like his entire group was called League of Villains, which I was like, how on the nose can you be?
Yeah, for sure.
And then, at least in the most recent arc with the villain arc, which I love Villain Hero Academia. I love that a whole lot more than My Hero. Just, can we have more villain hero?
What is it?
My Villain Academia.
Okay. I was like, yeah.
They call it My Villain Academia, and I love it so much. But
how about that flashback?
Yeah, you want to talk about it?
We'll get there.
And
we'll have to preface pretty hard spoiler alert before that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've already started talking about season 5, so I meant to say we were going to be talking about spoilers in the beginning, but I forgot about that. So this is, I guess, your belated spoiler warning.
Like, spoiler,
Yeah, I will.
So I guess we can talk about it now since we're talking about it. But kills his whole family. That seems good. That seems like a problem. Yeah,
and the whole thing where it's like he was abused by his dad, who was the son of All Might's master.
Oh, that's
which
that's pretty messed up too.
Yeah, and he had that whole complex of like, I don't want my son to be a hero, so It was like there was no rules except one rule, and the one rule is you can't talk about heroes. And I'm like, well, that's a
In a world full
crappy
of heroes.
rule. And like, the dad didn't explain anything to Shigaraki at all, so the dad was just terrible.
So you're saying the dad had it coming?
I did feel bad for the sister though. I felt really bad when the sister was the first one to go.
Yeah, that was tough.
I was like, that was brutal.
The dog.
And
I think the sister and the dog got me the most.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I didn't care so much about the grandparents because I completely got where Shigaraki was going with, like, you just sat there and watched this whole thing happen. And so totally get where he was going from that aspect. And but yeah, that whole, the way he even destroyed the house was just going berserk. And then letting loose and the against a creepy villain dude. I am so good with names.
No.
Not All for One. All for One, of course, took him in, but it went back to the present arc where they're taking on the Liberation Front. And that's how forgettable this villain was, honestly. Like, the entire point of this society was to set up Shigaraki.
Honestly, even in the manga, it's really like, what did I just watch? Like, let's look at? Because it was, it's the Liberation Army or whatever. Like, because it was just to bring legitimacy to Shigaraki, like, and to go away from like League of Villains and actually then have an army so that they could have a war arc, right? Like, yeah. I mean, his power is like cool, like the villain's power.
Yeah, but it's just instant death, and he was going around just destroying everything around him, and everyone's like, "What? He's awakening his power?" And I'm like, "Are we going One Piece all of a sudden?"
Yeah. Did he eat one of the devil fruits, or where are we at?
Yeah.
Let's see. What other big moments? I think
Twice. I love Twice.
Twice's backstory got me as well.
Yes. And I love his connection to Toga that got set up during the Overhaul arc. Like, that's probably one of my favorite moments during the Overhaul arc, was kind of how he and Toga were infiltrating Overhaul, and then they kind of had to backpedal a little bit.
Yeah.
And the whole like putting the scarf around his head and Toga literally taking control of Twice and calming him down. Just love that.
I mean, it really like gave a cool nod to relatively mentally disturbed and like broken people helping each other through it, right? And like, even though they're like murderers and killers, right? Like
well, yeah,
they still have human elements and human sides to them, right?
Well, and that's part of my favorite thing about Twice, is that not a lot of the heroes have powers that are like manifestation of mental illnesses. But his is literally kind of like split personality disorder, all wrapped up into one power, and I love that a lot.
It's interesting too, because like he never knows if it's actually himself, right? Like if he's actually the one anymore.
Yeah,
which is like a really interesting complex, and I think that Toga relates to, right? Because she's always trying to be somebody else.
Yeah,
yeah.
And she had a really nice moment in this arc too, where she kind of, I guess it wasn't nice, but she learned to let loose a little bit, because the whole interview lady was like, "Oh, you should." No, actually, they wanted to kill her. They wanted to get Twice, and they wanted to kill her. And there was like, "Oh, you're wearing a mask, you're wearing a facade, and this and that," because Toga just loves blood, and that's kind of a big no-no in society. And I mean, everyone's like, she loves blood, that's terrible. So she had to try and put on a facade, and then the whole like
Right.
something broke and she attacked the dude. We don't really know what happened to make her snap like that yet. If I don't know if they'll ever go into that, but
Yeah, I'm trying to
just that whole
trying to think for Toga,
yep.
if they do. I know they explore a little bit more of her like childhood backstory, but anyways, so backing up, one of the greatest episodes I think,
Mm-hmm.
well, one of the greatest animations I've ever seen was the fight between Todoroki and Deku at the tournament. Like
Yes.
it was brilliant. It
Yes.
was like they probably spent the whole animation budget of an entire show on that one episode, right? Where you're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
And that was what really sold me.
And they loved it because they replayed
Oh
it
yeah,
over
oh
and
yeah.
over
I
again.
mean, it was great. And I accepted that one.
Yeah.
That one was fine. Like I'm like, you should reuse
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so I really liked that.
And I love the whole implication that like Todoroki was trying to learn, like I think it was like freeze bird
Flash fire.
freeze flash
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that. The one power that Endeavor was like trying to teach him, and he was like, "No, I don't want to learn it," and then he ends up trying to use it.
And it's something that only he could do, right? So like Endeavor,
Yeah.
that's where he would pass Endeavor in strength, right? And like I think that's a pretty
Yeah.
cool thing for Todoroki to experience. And then let's see. So villain. All for one. We have to talk about.
Yeah. That's
He's
true.
nuts. And
Yeah, I do appreciate All for One because there's a weird side to him where he almost seems genuinely human. Like he almost seems like a genuine person up until you realize that he's doing everything for himself because All for One.
He reminds me
he's
a
a
lot
monster.
of, and I think this is intentional, of Hannibal Lecter from Sounds of the Lambs and like that series. Especially the way he like talks, and then like when he's in jail and like all these other things, right? Like
and he's just messing with everyone. He's like the controller's like, "Oh no, he moved," and he's like, "Oh yes, because you talking helped me reminisce on old memories."
It's like everybody's just
because he could hear him for some reason.
Everybody's just playing into his hands, right? So he's got some more yet to say, and that's all I'll say because I don't want to do manga spoilers. But he's a fascinating character just because of like his power, right? Essentially, he created One for All by accident. And I know it was his brother's power and all this other stuff, but like, it's just wild that he can just steal people's quirks and shit. I'm like, wait, what? Like.
And then transfer them to other people.
That's even crazier.
Yeah. That whole it was like a weird vision that Deku was having, where he was just sitting there and he's like, "Why am I seeing all these past members of One for All?" And then got to see how it all started with One for All.
Yeah, so. I mean it's a pretty unique way to set it up for sure. Like I like how they did that. And let's see. Probably one of my favorite moments as well was the training camp arc, like where the villains like pop into the middle of it.
Oh yeah,
because it really like it was the first time where you were like, oh shit's about to go down, right?
Yeah, and that's what I would like to see training arcs do more of. Like I know they already did like 2 of them because they were originally doing like a training thing, and then they showed up at UA, and then that instigated the whole "there's a spy among us" deal, and then they did it again in that forest, but I'd like to see some more incorporations of at least training, or like things like Deku could realize his power while doing a work study. That's kind of where I was going with the whole training. Like, I felt like these training arcs were not necessary. We could accomplish the exact same deal
with story,
but focusing along with the plot. Yeah.
For sure. And like they have examples of how they did it, right? I mean, like even the Stain arc, like Deku is still learning stuff about his power while fighting a
Hello.
relatively strong villain. So they have good examples for it.
We were talking about training arcs.
Yes, we're talking about the Hero 13 training arc where the villains pop in. Um, and like yeah, I liked the fact that they were like it also showed a really good dynamic to say these are really shitty villains that like they've assembled with like average powers, right? That like may look weird. But then these truly are the best heroes and students that UA has, right? And so it's this idea of like showcasing that they are extremely powerful in this world, even against hardened criminals, right? So like I like that they described that and showcased that. And then Eraserhead, I think I like him.
Oh
as a
yeah, I
character.
I do.
Uh,
Aizawa. I like the whole idea of he went up to the principal. It's like I want the power to expel people and then to
expelling them. Yeah.
re-enroll them.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
just to make UA sound tougher and his class sound tougher.
Yeah, yeah. And he's a big softy at heart, right? And I think his power is one of the strongest, right? Like when you really get down to the nitty
Yeah,
gritty, that like all he technically would have to do in theory to even kill like all for one is just activate his power and kill him, right? And just shoot him.
that
Like I
would
mean
be a
that's
still that'd be a very power or scary power for Over One to take too.
oh my gosh, I mean if he had his power it'd be over, right? The dude doesn't even have eyes though, so I don't know how that would work.
He'd just
Um,
give it to someone else, I guess. I don't know.
That's true. He'd get a side chick that just like followed him around.
Yeah,
um,
I'd say he get. We can't. There's no double quirks. Like no one can have two quirks.
Well, they can. They can. So like they do deal with that later on again in the manga. But they for sure can because when you look at All for One, I mean he uses like what does he say? He's got like three versions of thorns or like three versions of like hardened muscles, like all sorts of stuff, right, to make that big powerful attack. But no, he can give people multiple quirks.
Okay, because I
um,
was like, that would be a crazy one to give like Shigaraki.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is a limit though, but to your point. Like I think he can only like do so much with that or like you have to have the ability or like the body type to like do it or there's some weird restrictions on it. Otherwise, yeah, he could make some pretty bonkers villains. Speaking of bonkers villains, Muscular I thought was going to be a bigger character than he ended up being.
Yeah,
uh,
definitely felt that. I mean, that was
yeah.
kind of going along with my thinking that he was Bakugo's dad character because I was
Yeah.
thinking that that could help flesh out Bakugo even more. Like,
Hmm.
but no, no, yeah. There's a lot actually that was another issue that I've been having is that there's a lot of just villains that are there just to be villains. Like
Mm-hmm.
even the fodder villains that they try to have heroes go after. I'm sitting there and I'm like, why does anyone try? Like that's really it's like there is that one dude who was like, yeah, I chose this night. It was like the one night that the heroes wouldn't come. And you guys are ruining my plan because, of course, Bakugo and Todoroki show up right after taking their license exam. And they're like, they got it for 30 minutes and immediately they wanted to use it. And
Hmm. Hmm.
the poor villains was like, man, I planned everything for this. But I give that guy a pass because he planned, but everyone else just
Yeah.
seems to be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go rob a bank. Nothing will
Yeah. Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
here."
Well, and it is a little bit. I mean, it's interesting too because they do explain that a little bit, right? In the beginning where they say once All Might was introduced and like became this big hero, crime rates dropped, right? So they got to the point where like people didn't try. anymore. Like it was just like, because if All Might shows up, I'm dead or I'm in jail, like immediately. Like there's no saving grace there. And so I think that is, yeah, that's super true. And um
With Endeavor taking over the number one spot, I mean, they did mention that crime rate was going back up, but
Mm-hmm.
like All Might really wasn't doing that much towards his later end. Honestly, like
it was more what he represented, right? Like that, and in his prime, he was everywhere. At least
yeah,
in Japan. Like that's the other thing that like we're not talking about, right? Is like this all takes place in like Japan. And so if 80% of the world has powers, like are we saying like it's sort of like the aliens only come to Japan, you know? Or like you know, so it's like it's one of those things that's like what about the American heroes, or what about like Russian hero? You're like, you know, if you go across the world, what does that look like? I think that's what they're dealing with in
The world
vigilantes.
bit.
no, the World Mission and Vigilante. I'm sure like they're dealing that with, but yeah, World Mission or whatever, the third movie that I haven't seen. I haven't seen any of the movies.
Yeah, I haven't either. My issue with movies is like they'll look cool, but they don't have anything to do with the story.
Yeah, like some movies do, but it seems like these have no bearing on the story
At all.
I heard there was one
However,
movie that had a really cool fight between Endeavor and Dobby. So, I
oh,
think that was
okay.
the
Maybe that was the
latest one.
first. That was the latest one. Okay.
Yeah.
I did want to check out the one with Nine in it. That like villain that seemed pretty badass. But that's also the one where I think they share One for All, where like Bakugo and Deku and yeah, they like some partially share, which I believe is what Horikoshi, the creator of yeah, is thinking like for the end game of the power thing is like that it's not just one person's burden anymore, you know. So that would be interesting to see how that comes
Yeah,
together.
I can either see that or I could just see all or One for All just being completely abolished and Deku either reverting
Hmm.
back to being quirkless or maybe he already has a quirk and it's just haven't manifested yet. Um I
Yeah.
think I've seen like a theory or
So
two about that, which is
I've definitely seen some theories about that, and I have a theory about that, which like I mean they talk about it a little bit, and I didn't realize they even mentioned it until I rewatched part of season 1. But like that Deku's dad breathes fire. Like so Deku's dad is supposed to breathe fire and his mom obviously moves like the small objects or whatever. But what I thought would be really crazy is if All for One was Deku's dad or like his bloodline. Like I thought that would be wild. And that All for One actually takes Deku's quirk when he was born.
that's
and like some,
actually interesting because wasn't the
something crazy
doctor
like that.
for All for One the one that treats Shigaraki the
Yeah.
same doctor? So I can kind of see that.
I mean, I don't think it's real, but like yeah, I think it's far-fetched, right? But like I think it would be cool. But because of how old All for One is, it doesn't really make sense, right? Because like they mention how All for One's like 80 or 9 like 90, like I don't know, he's definitely old.
Well, hasn't he
Um.
like breached immortality? For some reason, I thought he was hundreds.
He he definitely oh yeah, yeah, cuz he definitely has because
There's like 6 generations of One for All.
yeah, but what they I don't know if they mentioned it yet in the anime, but you can only all One for All eventually kills you.
So
I
like
think they've
because you.
alluded to it, but they haven't
Okay.
Okay.
straight up mentioned it.
So that would be why, right? Like is that it's probably been 20, 30 years each time and he's kind of hunted him down each time. But still, that puts him in 140, you know, 150 range, I think is where they're at. So it doesn't make sense that he would be Deku's dad. Deku's grandpa, maybe, but like then that would be weird that they have weird grandparent complexes with Shigaraki and Deku. It'd be a little much.
I mean, they're already trying to give them parallels. Like, there's no need for any more family. We don't need a
Yeah. Yeah.
Skywalker situation where everyone's a
We're
Skywalker
good
or
there.
Solo.
Yeah, and you've already got enough family issues with Endeavor, so um
Well, one other
So did
character
you?
that I really wanted to
Yeah,
talk about is Shinzo. I
Shinzo. I like him.
I love Shinzo because Shinzo represents the the bad aspect of heroism where everybody
Hmm.
looks into heroism as like the guy who's like proper, clean. They look
Mhm.
like a good guy. That's what everyone sees. Whereas Shinzo doesn't look like a good guy, and everybody's kind of terrified of him because he has that mind control power.
Mhm.
And that is the one thing that I loved about the training arc this last season was how much it focused on Shinzo. Like I said though, I think they could have done it
Yeah.
during with like a work study or implementing it in the story a different way, but I still like the whole aspect of like Shinzo trying to establish himself as a hero fighting against what's really negative stereotypes.
mhm. Yeah, I like that a lot. He also looks like Aizawa's love child, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah. But no, I mean his power is like again extraordinarily strong and like could so easily be used for evil that to your point is like he's fighting that stereotype so hard that and he just wants to be a hero. He's like back to your point of what characters you like the most, which is he's just a genuinely good person who just happens to look like a villain, right? Um, but then that brings up the aspect of like what is a villain and what is a hero, which I think they do a nice job of with Endeavor. I wish they did a better job of it in totality, right? They do a little bit with Hawks. They do a little bit with like some of the others. And
Hawks
again, the
is a
manga gets
real
into more of
interesting
this.
character too.
Like
Yeah.
I love how
House is
he
complex.
infiltrated pretty much the League of Villains and the
Hmm.
whole how he did it and how he's like triple agenting everyone like I'm sitting
Hmm.
here and it's like I could see him being on both sides, honestly, on either side.
I mean, and you genuinely believe him for a little while. You're like, oh, he's a villain, and then he's like, wait, oh, maybe not. Because has the anime gotten to the point where he fights twice
No.
or not yet? Not yet. Okay, that's a pretty cool fight. So like there is a point where he does fight him, and then I think he fights Dabi too. But um, so yeah, I like Hawks a lot. I like Hawks a lot. He's a good character, but yeah, I think they toe the line between what is a hero and what's a villain, particularly around like the destruction of property.
Like
Yes, yeah.
destruction of like the
That
city,
although I
right?
still have a hard time believing half the time because they're like no casualties even though skyscrapers
Yeah.
have fall. Like that whole it was like
You're like,
that whole
what bullshit.
Endeavor versus the Nomu fight. There was no casualties. And I'm sitting there like
Thousands of people.
Dead. Like no way. Yeah, no way. But it's supposed to be. Although I don't think it's a kids show anymore. I'd say it sort of started that way.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It definitely had that feeling of it being kind of I almost want to call it cartoony because it felt like it was geared towards younger generations, but I'm always hesitant whenever I say cartoony because I love Avatar: The Last
Yeah.
Airbender, and I'd almost consider that more anime. But
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
so it that's
Nickelodeon's
where the
greatest
whole
show.
lines blur.
Yeah, that and SpongeBob. I'd say SpongeBob's up there in the anime world. No, although they did make that anime version of Sponge.
Oh, yeah. Too bad he struggled with like copyright issues. Like he was getting
Yeah.
sued or something, which was sad because
Yeah.
everything was his own content, but the characters
Right.
aren't. Even though
Yeah.
technically if you're spoofing characters, I think you're good.
I mean, it's fair use technically, but like Nickelodeon's such a big conglomerate. That and Disney, right? Like those are the two that you're never gonna get around. Um, so I mean, anyways, so yeah, I like My Hero a lot. But I've made
I was gonna say, it
songs
sounds
I
like
even know
we're
about.
about time to close things up. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about in My Hero Academia? Anything else you feel like
Uh,
bringing up?
I mean, I still like, as much as like Overhaul as a villain's not like the greatest. I really liked the quandaries that they introduced, like the idea of like taking the powers away and how that would like fix society, even though like we don't have powers and our society is pretty fucked up. Um,
I
and
mean,
then
they took away Mirio's power, and honestly, for me, I love Mirio a whole lot more than Deku.
mm, yeah. I mean, hashtag should have been the, you know, inheritor of One for All. But no, Mirio is great as a character, and like I think a good foil for Deku too, uh, as like kind of an older brother type vibe. But they were so similar in so many ways, right? Had to work really really hard to get where they are. Um, but no, that scene was probably the most gut wrenching for me. Was Mirio losing his power, like Night Eye, and then Airy kind of like seeing all that collapse.
And then,
but yeah,
what's his name dying? Nighthawk.
Night Eye, yeah, Night Eye dies.
again, spoiler.
That was rough too.
Yeah, Night Eye was rough, especially because of his power. I thought it was like kind of cool how they did it, where he like stopped seeing the future, right? And like that's it. Um, but then I thought I really liked that Shigaraki did to Overhaul. I was like, that's so good. You take away his powers and then you take away his arms. So like there's no way, even if he got his powers, like I don't even know if he could get his powers back and it would work, you know, like I don't know. It was such a dark justice moment for me, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, all right. Sounds like it's about time to wrap up this conversation. You want to plug yourself? Anything you want to plug?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can find me at Rhyce Records on YouTube, RHYCE, if you're looking for that. Make music about anime. I have a few My Hero songs, Kurogiri, Shigaraki, I mean, Mirio, although some of those are my older songs, so I would, you know, caution you for those. Uh, and yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all the usual places.
All right. And I think you have a song coming out this weekend.
I do, yeah. A song coming out this weekend for Pain, so from Naruto. So super excited. Metal vibes, you know, rock on.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good.
Forgot to mention earlier when we first started, you made the intro for this podcast. So
Oh
thank
yes,
you
yeah.
all so.
You bet, man. And I'll be sure to get you an early link to that Pain song. I did finish it, so whenever you get a chance, yeah.
Yeah,
Check it
yeah,
out.
definitely. Just send it to me. All
Cool.
right, everyone. Well, thank you for checking us out. I'm the Anime Overanalyst, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
All right. Take care, all.
Talking nerdcore today. We're talking nerdcore. Talking nerdcore.